Hey everyone, welcome to another Speed Secrets podcast. Today's guest is Michele Graf. Michele, welcome to the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Ross. Me too. This is just really exciting. Thanks for the invitation. I think we're
Well,
gonna have a fun chat today.
yeah, absolutely. Any time that we can sit around and just talk about driving. I mean, how much better can it get, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could be on track actually driving rather than talking about it.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. But then again, we have work to do so that we can fund our little obsession, I guess. So we
Don't
can't
you
be out there every day.
don't you hate when work gets in the way of the important things?
I do. I do.
Uh, oh well. Hey, I'll admit you are not the most experienced driver that I've ever had on the podcast, and that's a good thing.
Right.
I know but there are things that you've experienced and you are experiencing that others can relate to and they can learn from. And I guess, what you've shared with me is you did some track day stuff. What was that, 7, 8 years ago or something like that? Then took a kind of a break and then you've sort of come back again.
Right.
Uh, can you kind of just fill us in on sort of that background part?
Sure, for sure. So yes, you're right. Gosh, probably 8 years ago, my then partner at the time, he was starting to get into performance driving a little bit through the local Porsche club. And he said, "Hey, do you want to come out to a skills day sometime? I think you'd really like it. It's really fun." And I thought, all right, sure. Like I've always liked driving. I've always liked cars. I didn't really grow up as a quote unquote car girl, but having a car at age 16 to get to work was just my pride and joy. So just being behind the wheel and maybe being a little aggressive sometimes and scaring myself
Uh-huh.
back into being a good driver has just sort of always been there. And I thought, okay, this will be cool. So completed a skills day with the local Pacific Northwest region Porsche Club. They run an excellent program, and I just kind of got hooked. And so for several years after that, I'd go out off and on and do another skills day. So I think I did probably 5 or 6 of those. And then the Porsche Club runs a women's day once a year. And so I participated in that women's HPDE day. So I participated in that out at Pacific Raceways. Again, amazing experience, completely different than a skills day when you're actually on track, learning to drive at speed, incorporating those skills that you learned at skills day, started all coming together. So a couple HPDE days, and then kind of life came about and I was focusing on other things in the world, wasn't doing driving things, never got super serious about it, though it was really fun. And then fast forward to a couple years ago, I am on my own, single lady, and I thought I always really liked to do that. So why can't I just go do it by myself?
Uh-huh.
So, in a moment of courage, I got on my computer and signed up for IRDC one-day competition school. I kind of knew Bill Ecker, who's a Pro 3 racer in the region, and he's with IRDC, and he was coordinating the school. And so I was like, well, I know Bill because he was my instructor a long time ago for a BMW day. So, okay, I want to do this. So I did the one-day school, which was a combination of skills day and some on-track driving. And I was lucky enough to have Wes Hill as my instructor that day.
And yes, you were lucky to have Wes.
I was, the minute we were on the track together in my little Mini Cooper, I just knew. I was like, this is going to be an experience like no other. And I still don't know that I've ever driven quite as like hard and aggressively as I did that day with Wes. And it was just amazing, an amazing experience. And I think that probably set me off on this kind of crazy journey. Like, okay, we'll keep doing that. And so I signed up for 1-day school with Performance out at Pacific Raceways, and Don and Donna Kitch have been very welcoming to me ever since then. I eventually was signed off solo. So at this point, I go out and do full or half-day lapping sessions whenever I can, whenever I have time and whenever I can afford it. Because I don't know if you've heard, but it's not a cheap hobby to have.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just put that, make note of anyone listening. So, yeah. So lapping days, what else have I done? I'm doing autocross out at Evergreen Speedway with, they do an autocross every month. I don't go out every month, but I'm there every couple months, usually with my group of friends who drive Mini Coopers. I'm active in the local Puget Sound Mini Motoring Club, and a bunch of us take our minis out there, and that's pretty great. It's similar skills to being on the big track, as I call it, just kind of compressed and a little more aggressive. I think there's less brake modulation and just all out going. And I've done one dirtfish day. So I gave it a go as a rallycross driver for a day, or practicing that. And that was really fun. So yeah, and these last experiences have been in the past couple years. And so I'm just pushing myself to keep learning and growing the best I can with my Mini. And that's kind of where I'm at.
So I don't want to get too caught up in the, you say the single lady, the women in this sport and stuff like that, because
Yeah.
I'll apologize right now. As far as I'm concerned, you're a driver.
Yeah.
However, women in the sport, there are fewer of them, right? And when you mentioned dirtfish, I don't know if you know, but like early on, I was involved with the startup of Dirtfish Rally School, and I remember we had a 3-day school, and a woman came. Actually, she came from, I think, Toronto, out here to go through a 3-day school. She owned a Subaru. Somehow through Subaru Canada, she found out about Dirtfish. She came out to it. She went through the 3-day rally school, and I'm not going to say she was the fastest driver, but she progressed well. She learned a lot. She had some fun. And I remember at the very end of the day, she's just about to leave. We've done all the wrap up. She's just about to leave, and I just said, "What do you think?" And she had some life changes, and that's why she was there. And she looks at me and she goes, "I think I remember how to have fun now." And I thought, how cool is that? Like,
Right.
Driving is, there's the driving part, but then there's the what you get out of it that applies to everything else. So that was really, really cool. So
Absolutely. That is a great story. I think I can relate to that a little bit. I think I tell people when they kind of ask me about it, I think everyone thinks, oh, you must be an adrenaline junkie. You must be super competitive. Or it's assumed that I am those things. And I don't know that anyone who knows me would say I am those things. I think for me, getting out on track, yes, it kind of triggers a bit of that competitive edge that I didn't know I had, and it's mostly competition with myself. But I think the bigger piece for me is when I'm out on the track, like my brain can't think about anything else. Like I can't think about what's happening at work, things in my personal life that, we all have. I think that when you're on the track, your brain just naturally engages in this very intense task at hand. And the times that the real life kind of crops into your brain, you immediately feel it in the car. So it's just this instant, like, hey, you're not thinking about that. You have a job to do right now if you would like to keep 4 wheels on the pavement and not in the gravel. So yeah, it's, it might sound cliche, but it's excellent therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how the average person, when they hear about you drive on the track, they immediately go, "Oh, you must be on adrenaline. You must like risk taking. You must be, all of those things." And oh yeah, and you must have really good reflexes and all of these things. And there's a lot of misperceptions out there, aren't there?
Great. Absolutely, yes. And I think, like I said, for me, the competition is really with myself. And I think probably, especially those first couple times I went out with IRDC and with their school and performance, it really settled in me that it's more about surprising myself and what I can do. And I think that's kind of addictive. And maybe other drivers feel that way too, right? Like, wow, I didn't realize I could make the car do that. I never expected that I would be able to put myself in this car and drive 120 miles an hour. Because again, I drive a Mini, so that's fast.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, it is pretty great. I mean, I suppose there's the element of adrenaline there, of course. Those things are happening in our bodies and it's exciting. And, we don't get those exciting moments in real life very often. But overall, it's just sort of like I walk away and think, whoa, that's really cool. Like I did so much better at X today than I did last time I was out here. It's just, it just builds on, one thing builds on another. And I think it's just a lot of like self-improvement, which I'm a fan of. I'm a lifelong learner. So I think that's just part of my journey right now is being on track.
I wonder I wonder what percentage of drivers would define themselves the same way as a lifelong learner, a self-improvement. I do know there are some drivers that I'd say the improvement part is not that big a deal. They kind of want to just go improve what they already can do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to say that's a pretty small percentage of drivers. Like it seems to me that most are, have that same kind of thing. Like, it's I did that then. Well, now I need to do this, So
yeah.
One of the things that you told me and through some email stuff and stuff like that, you'd said that you were quietly competitive, mostly with yourself, and that you like chasing people and stuff. But so is it the competitiveness of catching that other car, that other driver, or is it the competitiveness of you? If I do catch that other car, that means that I've improved. Which comes first, I guess?
I think which comes first? I think it's both for sure. I think at the beginning of my driving journey, that competitive nature was mostly like, whoa, look what, whoa, I just did that. I can't believe it. Okay, Michelle, do better next time for you. And now, even though I'm still, I think, considered a novice, maybe an advanced novice, I'm not sure. There's that element of, I want to catch that car. And if I can get the point by, because I'm not racing, we're doing lapping days. And so in my mind, if you get the point by, it means you're doing something right.
A little reward?
Right, for sure. And, again, I am very often out on track with really big power cars, and I drive a momentum car. And so I've known from the beginning that I really have to work on skills and not rely on my car to be the total rock star on track, if that makes sense. And so I think now when I'm able to maybe not catch a car, but I know that they're not getting any further ahead, that I'm like kind of keeping pace, at least in a way. And if I can get the point by, there's definitely some cheering. And I don't have a high-tech data system going in the Mini at this point, but I do take video, and I crack myself up sometimes when I come home and watch it, and I hear, because I talk to myself while I'm driving, and I also cheer myself on.
Good.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
well,
yeah, and I I've had track days with friends, and so when you have friends on track who drive similar cars, that I think helps the competitive nature because we're all a little more equally matched.
Right.
And so I think my best timed lap out at Pacific Raceways was on a day when my friend in a similar Mini Cooper GP was driving, and I spent all day just trying so hard to stick with him. He has years and years more experience than I do. And while I never got the point buy from him, I did really well and I got my best time. And it just was like, that was a successful day to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to what you said about you're driving a momentum car and some people are not driving a momentum car. I'm going to let you in a little secret here. They are all momentum cars.
I knew you were going to say that.
Just that there are some drivers who don't believe they're driving a momentum car, and the fact that you know that you're driving a momentum car gives you an advantage because you're working on stuff that's going to help you no matter what you drive going forward. So
Right.
that is awesome that you're doing that. And that feedback that you get when you get through a corner or through a section of track and you're following somebody that you think or know that they're driving a car that's probably a little bit quicker, yeah, that reward feels pretty darn good, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other piece for me is that there can be that competitive piece out on the track, but the more that I talk to people in the paddock, we come into the pits, I guess, for the most part, it doesn't matter what kind of car any driver is driving. Like, we're all sharing this experience of like trying to be better or worrying about the same things, having similar insecurities or questions about what we're doing. And I think the more I interact with drivers that way, I think that's an equalizer as well.
Yeah.
It's helpful. I know one of my last track days, there was a driver, and I forget what kind of car he had, but it was fast. It was one of those cars that rolls into the paddock and you think, oh yeah, he's going to be really, really good. And I didn't know him, but after a first session or two, we were both had come in to the paddock and he was standing outside his car getting a drink of water. And I pulled up and I said, how's it going? And he just looked at me and he kind of had like a lot of fear and worry on his face. And he said, everyone's just so fast. I just think I'm holding everyone up. And I learned, it was one of his first times back after one day school. And it reminded me that we're all learners. It doesn't matter what kind of car you're in, and you can't make assumptions about anyone based on what they're driving. So it was an interesting moment. And of course I said, you're doing great, and kind of cheered him on like people did for me. And so, I don't know, the camaraderie just helps a lot.
Isn't it interesting how we assume that others don't have the same concerns, fears, anxiousness, nervousness, all those things? We kind of assume everybody else is all okay, and we're the only ones that are like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever, like, you talked about the, people thinking that you're adrenaline junkie and all that kind of stuff. Have you ever really thought, why is it that I'm doing this? Like, why this and not tennis or playing a musical instrument or whatever? What is it about driving a car around a track that appeals to you?
Yes, I've thought of this often. I think
I'm really looking forward to you having the answer.
Well, it depends on the day. Some days it's one answer and other days it's a different answer. To be quite honest, I've had times where I think, what am I trying to prove to the world? Am I trying to prove something to the world that I can do this? And I think, in recent history, we hear this term imposter syndrome pop up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more common that we're all sort of understanding what that means now. And I have to kind of remind myself, like, that's what's creeping in, right? And I think there's a little bit of that element that, I mean, unfortunately, as a woman, sometimes people don't expect you to be able to do certain things, especially when it's kind of like me, just very grassroots and learning as I go without a lot of resources or help. And so I think I doubt myself sometimes and wonder, like, what are you trying to prove? And I have to tell myself at this point, you know, all these years in, and especially the last 2 years with what I've been investing, if I was being an imposter or trying to prove something, I would have gotten bored. I would have, I probably would have moved on to something else, right? To like feed something. And so, you know, that helps me. I think the other part of it is thinking through what I get out of it. And again, getting on the track and just proving to myself that I can get out of my head and I can focus only on a skill that I see growing every time, like builds a level of strength and confidence that I can take outside of the track. And, you know, I don't know that I'll ever be a world traveling pro racer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little older now. I probably missed that boat. But I think there are a lot of us out there that, especially women, who have it in them to do something kind of daring and exciting, but they don't know where to start. If they got behind a car and they could show themselves they could do this, there's like so much strength in that to take elsewhere, into your career, into your relationships, into your friendships. Like, just showing up to life is easier when you've conquered something that is pretty hard. It's it's not an easy thing to get behind the wheel and be on a racetrack. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think I just rambled a little bit.
No,
But
it's interesting, and I mean, it leads me to a bunch of questions. But like, first thing is, have you read Fast Girl, the book Fast Girl by Ingrid Stephenson?
yes, because I read it after listening to her on your
Ah,
podcast.
okay, yes. And I mean, to me, it's not a book for women; it's a book for anybody. But
Right.
eh, so maybe I said I wasn't going to get focused on the whole female male thing, but just for listeners who are, because I know that people that listen to this podcast, some of them or many of them are, you know, they're involved with car clubs and different organizations that are always looking at trying to bring more people into the sport. And I'd just be interested in your perspective of what can we do to, I guess, be more inclusive to help more women and other people who typically don't get involved in our sport. What can we do to help them get more involved in this sport? How can we bring more of them in?
This is a good question, and I've had this conversation with a couple people before, and I don't know that I have, you know, the best answer. I can say that maybe for the most part, motorsports, I think, just traditionally seems like, you know, it kind of carries its own sort of reputation as being like that, again, that adrenaline sport that mostly men go after, even though there are a lot of amazing female racers.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And I am on track with amazing female drivers. My friend Anne is out there. Every time I see Anne roll into the paddock, I'm like, I'll be pointing Anne by all day, you know, and I've watched her learn and grow, and she's great. But I think that just putting more women's faces, you know, women who are doing this, like putting their faces out there more, like telling their stories. I think that doing more women's only events would be helpful. I I don't, like me, myself, I don't especially feel intimidated driving with mostly all men. Sometimes I do. I think there are a lot of women though that would feel more comfortable with events that are just like geared toward women. And I know that the Porsche Club does a good job with that with their Women's Day, their Women's HPDE Day. And there's, I think, a couple other regional women's groups that try to do, like, invite women into motorsports a little bit more, you know, because there are a lot of women who love cars. There are a lot of women who love what cars can do, and maybe they don't always understand how to access putting those cars on a racetrack. So I think putting out information about like the steps to get there, because it can be confusing, right? It seems like, oh, I already have to be I already have to be a quote unquote good driver to go really fast on a racetrack. So
good point.
Yeah, like helping women understand, like, oh, you start with a skills day. Okay, I could do that. And then these are the steps after that. I do a 1-day school, then I get signed off solo. I might work with a coach. Oh, there's coaches. How do I find coaches? I think, you know, we're all really busy, but I think traditionally there's a lot of women who are also wives and mothers. You know, they're super busy and maybe they have it in them like, that would be so cool. I want to go do it. But how are they going to find the resources? How do they sit and do the research to figure it all out? So, you know, just, I don't know really if that answers the question.
Yeah.
But...
Well, as you're saying that, it's like, I have talked to men who said, I didn't get involved for a long time because I just didn't think I was a good enough driver. So same kind of thing, you know. So,
right. Absolutely.
So I, you know, maybe my takeaway is, you know, just making the sport more accessible, make people know more about it, but also, I guess, put less barriers up.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Let's kind of switch here a little bit and less about all that kind of woo-woo stuff.
Okay.
Let's talk driving. Like,
okay.
What is the single most difficult skill or technique that you've had to really work on and really focus on learning?
Man, I had a feeling you were going to ask me this question.
Oh.
And because of the nerd that I am, I took some notes.
Okay.
You know, but thinking about it just kind of off the cuff at this moment, I'm thinking of skills as like, I don't even know if this makes sense, but hard skills and soft skills. And hard skills in my mind are like the real technical things, like braking and what your body is doing in the car and with the car, right? And then I'm thinking of these soft skills that you talk a lot about on your podcast and your materials, like the stuff that's happening in your brain. So I think for me, the two skills that I struggle with at this point are my focus and my mental game, like getting out of my own way in my head. And like the quote unquote hard skills would be probably my braking and getting on throttle sooner, so I can maximize what my car can actually do on the racetrack.
So going to that hard skill, the braking and getting back on power, how much of that is, I guess, sensing what the car is capable of and trusting that the car is capable of that? So in a way, I guess it's almost a little bit of a soft skill that leads to the hard skill of the braking and the on power part. How much of it is that, and how much of it is just building the habit of, okay, now I'm going to brake hard. And for years of driving on the street, I haven't had to brake hard, or I haven't braked hard.
Right. That all of the above, Ross.
D.
D. I picked D.
Yeah.
So first of all, yeah, it's a mental barrier for sure. I think connected to confidence for one, like trusting what my brakes will do. And you can ask my MINI Cooper friends, I've had like much experience changing out my brake pads like constantly to try to find the right setup. But it's the confidence in believing my brake pads are going to do what I need them to do. And I think it is also overcoming those mental barriers of like how I drive on the street. Yeah.
So
interesting,
Michelle,
sure.
can I interrupt just for a second? Would you
Yes.
come over and change the rear brake pads on my Mini? Because it's a pain on that.
Oh my goodness. My friend Kurt keeps scolding me, and he keeps telling me you're going to need to learn to do this on your own, because I trundle over to his garage and I say, okay, these are the pads. Let's do these. And he's like, all right, I'm going to show you again. So I'm getting there. So give me a couple more months and I'm happy to come over.
Okay. I mean, I've changed a gazillion different brake pads in my life, but the calipers on the rear of a Mini, they're just a pain because you got to twist the piston. Anyway, so okay, we're off topic there for a little bit. Okay. But I will call you in a couple months when I got to change my rear pads. So
okay. It's a deal.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So there is that trust part. There is the actual building the programming or the habit of braking hard, all that kind of stuff. The other thing you touched on that was really, I want to ask your thoughts on that. When you said focus and getting out of your own way, I would say that's a massive challenge for everybody. Like, who listening to this podcast hasn't had that experience where you just overthinking things, overanalyzing things, or your mind's thinking about what's somebody thinking about me at the moment, or even, what's going on at work today, all of those things, and getting back into the moment and out of the way of caring what other people think or what I should be doing. Do you have what have you learned about that, I guess?
What I've learned is, so early on, one of my coaches, or a coach out at Performance, Curtis Krieger, who's become a bit of a friend, just when I go out there, he's just always kind and just kind of talks me through, what are you going to do today? How's the car feeling? Even if it's not a full-on coaching session, he's just always really good about checking in and talking to me, as are all of the instructors out at Performance. They're just fantastic that way. But early on, I think Curtis picked up on that stumbling block of mine, because I came off the track and circled around in the paddock and then kind of stopped, and he came up and he's like, what's going on out there? What's happening? And I just said, I don't know. And this, and I don't know the car, it's doing this. And he goes, you need to stop thinking so much. You need to get out of your own head. And if, he said it in a very kind, older brother kind of way. And I was like, yeah, yep, you're right. And just to have somebody instantly see how I was processing, it helped a lot. And so I think doing that, another thing that I try to do is I do track notes. And I'm not always good about doing my notes after a session, but I'm really good about doing pre-driving notes. And so I kind of make a list of what my goals are for the day and how I'm feeling, to try to sort of journal out some of that busy brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And one thing I've been reminding myself of often is take up space. And I think part of that comes from listening to your podcasts and talking to coaches, use all the track. When you apex and you're tracking out of your turn, you have to use up all the track. And I kind of apply that to myself as well. Just take up space in this world. You get to be here. You paid for the day like everybody else. Just take up your space, mentally. Be out there and use it. Use the track and use what you know. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I think that's awesome. It's what a cool way of looking at it.
Yeah. So that helps. It helps. And, you know, I'll be in mid session and feel my brain like starting to do that thing where it's like, oh no, I'm going to have to like point these two people by. I hope I didn't hold them up. Oh, I think I just screwed up, 5A and 5B. Like, I just don't feel right. And what do they think about, how I did that? And I just have to say, take up your space, take up your space. They'll get the point by. Just do what you need to do. And it's a constant reminding. And I'm really hoping I have to do that less this coming season.
But I love that. And it's a great trigger, as you were talking about the, getting out of your way kind of thing. The other trigger, the trigger that I use a lot, you may have heard this before, but sometimes I'll just say drive stupid, like kind of turn your brain off and just trust yourself to drive. And so let me ask this question: if you and I were going to the track tomorrow, and I was going to be there to coach you, what would we work on?
Tires, Ross.
Tires.
Tires. Getting to know my tires. Traction, for sure. I think, I don't know. I mean, I suppose seasonally, the goals and the skill sets change, right? So the last time I was out at the track was a few weeks ago. And I had swapped over my all-season tires onto my car because I track my daily driver. And so, you got to still get around to the grocery store and go on the racetrack. And so I had my all-season tires on, and it changed the whole experience, even though last year at this time I'd done the same thing on those same tires. But this last session, I think I outdrove those tires in my first session. I mean, I didn't melt them off the car, but my traction was just not there at all. And so I think I would ask, can you help me start to really understand what my tires are doing and when, and how to adjust that as I go, or even before I, get to a point of sloppy tires. And then I think I would ask you to help me work on coming off brakes sooner, where I can do that, and trust that, I can set the car, get the car settled, and get into my turn. So that it's a tall order, I know.
No, I mean, the interesting thing is that if I sat down with, I had James Hinchcliffe, IndyCar driver, on a couple months ago. And if I asked him that same question, I might get different words, but similar kind of things to focus on. Yeah. It's all about the tire traction, and it's all about the brake release. So, so it doesn't, it's interesting that you pick those, because I'm like, wow, that's no different than just about any other driver as well. But I want to go back to the tire thing for a minute. On a scale of 1 to 10, when you're driving on your track tires, your performance tires, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the limit, Lewis Hamilton's in your car, he's going to drive those tires at 10. Where do you think that how close are the tires typically on average are? And I know that it could be in the brake zone, they're at a 9, and in the turn in it might be a 6 or whatever. But on average, where would you say you are?
On my summer tires, I would say on average, I probably am not driving at the limit as often as maybe I could be. I would say that I'm between like a 6 and an 8, maybe, for me, I think.
Well, and good point there, in that is, One of the differences between you and Lewis Hamilton is his bank account, probably. But no,
Right.
he when whatever he drives at, it's a 9.9 or a 10 or a 9.5 or a 10.1, whatever it is, the tires are there all the time.
Hmm.
As a less experienced driver, there's going to be parts of the track where you're going to be at a 6, and other parts it's going to be at a 10, and then it's going to be at an 8, and then it's going to be at a 7, and then it's going to be at a 9. And so part of that is getting more consistent, narrowing it down so that you're staying at whatever that limit is more often.
Right.
So then
Right.
the next part of this question then is, on your all-season tires, where were you driving them at?
I honestly feel like I was driving, I feel like I was at a 9 on those tires.
Yeah.
Especially after they got hot, after just even one session. And I'm thinking, you'll know what I mean, like in turn 2, right? Like
Yeah.
at Pacific Raceways.
Big, long, fast, sweeping corner.
Yeah. And that's where I really started feeling like that like hold, and then that little hiccup of a give, and then hold, and then, like that traction, just like, let's go for a minute. Which again, when you're an advanced novice like me, you have that moment of like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? But then there's this mini celebration of like, ooh, hey, I just learned something. I adjusted my wheel just a little bit to compensate, and look, like I still held the line. So I guess maybe that was the question that just popped into my head is how do I begin to recognize when I'm driving my tires at the limit? Are those the moments?
First of all, doing it in a corner like turn 2 or turn 8 at Pacific Raceway, and just for those of you who don't know Pacific, they're big, long, 180-degree corners, but turn 2 is, depending on the car, can be a 4th gear corner. So you're going through there really fast. Turn 8 is slightly slower, but still a fast, relatively fast corner.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about long corners is, the opposite. The bad thing of a short corner is you turn in, the car slips for like a fraction of a second, and you're like, well, what just happened?
Yeah.
Whereas in turn 2, you're in the corner, and it's kind of like, oh, there's a little slip. Oh, the car's understeering a little bit. It's understeering a little bit. It's understeering. I'm just going to breathe the throttle and bring it back in a little bit. Or it's oversteering a little bit. I just kind of balance the car with the throttle and got it. Okay, balanced out. Like you're in the corner long enough that you can start to feel that and then sense that. And it's not a, oh my God, what just happened? It's a, I got this. Oh, that's interesting. I got that. Oh, I'm going to play with this a little bit. And I would say that at some point, I'd say that you probably already experienced this to some extent, especially on the all-season tires, but there's a point in the corner where you're like, oh, they're sliding a little bit. I'm going to play with this. Mm-hmm. And when you can get to the point where you're playing with it all the way through the corner, then you're Lewis Hamilton. So I didn't answer your question, did I?
No, I think you did. I think you did. And it makes me think about getting back to like that, the mental part of it. Like I think there are limits to the equipment of the car, to the tires. And I think that we have our own mental limits. And I think sometimes those two things, meeting those limits, kind of have to happen at one time to push through, right? To understand them and understand how you can compensate for both. And so I think for me, one of the things that I wrote down before we talked is this idea that I need to loosen up, that I drive tight. And what I mean by that is like mentally and physically. Like I have to remind myself, like, loosen up your shoulders. Get those fingers off the steering wheel, like play with those fingers, like loosen them up, and then breathe, like get that air in your body and loosen up yourself. And so I think when those little wiggles happen in the car, when I'm driving close to the limit of the tires, it can unsettle my mind a bit. And I've known for a while that I need to let myself do that so that I can start finding an ease, and knowing like, you got this, you know how to calibrate, your car's not going to spin off the track. Hopefully, if I'm like relaxed and doing it right. So again, that was probably a ramble fest, but it's such a mental thing that goes along at the same time as like this crazy car doing crazy things.
Yeah. Well, can I say two things here? One is, first off, you're talking about feeling the tires and stuff, and I'll just try to make this story quick. Was just a couple weeks ago, I raced at COTA in a World Racing League endurance race, 8-hour race on Saturday, 8-hour race on Sunday. I'm sharing a BMW with another driver, and through the big long carousel, which is a 180-degree approximately corner at COTA, fast corner underneath the turn 16, 17, 18. And I'm going through there, and I can hear the tires scrubbing. And as I'm going through there, all I'm doing is I'm paying attention to the sound. And when the tires are making this kind of growling, scrubbing sound, I know I'm scrubbing off speed. When they're kind of just on a kind of a singing, howling sound, it's like, ooh, there's the limit. And if they're not making enough of that sound, I'm below the limit. So as I'm driving through this corner, all I'm doing is I'm paying attention to the sound, and I'm adjusting my speed to get the right sound. And, if there's too much of that and I'm getting a little bit too much scrub, I've actually just got to I'm not going to lift out of the throttle. I'm just going to hold the throttle there, because the car will scrub off a speed and bring it back down that 1 mile an hour or 2 miles an hour slower than I was, because I was scrubbing too much. So I'm basically just driving the car completely off the sound of the tires. Now, I know some tires don't make as much noise as others, but that's an example of, turn 2 at Pacific Raceway, going through there, and all you're doing is just paying attention to the sound and the feel of that tire, to the point where it's like, oh, I can dial it up 1 mile an hour. Oh, I got to back it down 1 mile an hour. And you're just playing with it all the way through there. And that's a cool thing. The second part I was going to say there was, when you're talking about being tight in the car, do you use visualization, mental imagery?
Not as much as I should. I know I have started in the last couple months to try to have kind of a mindfulness practice where I just, every day, not just track days, or every other day, I just try to kind of sit and practice that, like focusing on breath and being still. And so that's the extent. I have not, and as I know you advocate for this, I need to do it.
Well, here's my suggestion then, would be, if you took 10, 15 minutes almost every day, as often as you can, and all you did was you close your eyes, relax, breathe, and saw yourself going through turn 2, but pushing the limits, and the car like stepping out a little bit, and it's pushing a little bit, and then it steps out a little bit. And each time that happens, like probably the first time you do it, even in your mind, you're going to tighten up a little bit. And then you go, and then you relax. And the more you practice that in your mind, the next time you get on the track and the car steps out a little bit, you go, I'm okay with that. Like you just, so you're building that programming, feeling relaxed. And, I watch some drivers, I've ridden in cars on the street with some people who, they are just so comfortable with the car sliding that, they're just playing with it, and they're like not tense at all. And other people, the car steps out and they tighten right up again. So it's just it's a learned habit. So if you took a little time each day, and just, rather than focusing on the technique so much, focus more on I'm relaxed when the car moves around. And and by the way, I actually like it when it moves around.
I have heard that from many a driver, and some race car drivers too, that, there's an art to it, and it's just this fun challenge. And even watching their videos and watching how they drive the line through the track and watching their hands and seeing them making those adjustments because the tires are getting hot, or they were off their line because there was another car there. It's really, really cool. And I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially because at the level that I'm at and the way my brain works is that I can be pretty regimented. And so I'm pretty much just driving the school line, the line that they teach us is like the safest but fast way around the track. And so one of my goals in the coming driving season is to start moving the car a little bit around on the track to understand how things change. That'll be a pretty big challenge for me in the way my brain works. I'm a rule follower, Ross. Stay on the line.
The line's not as important as you think. So yeah, start. Maybe the other thing you want to do is get a coloring book and color outside the lines too, just for a little while.
Yes, I think you're right.
Just for fun, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Michele, thanks so much for being on the show. But before you go, I got to ask you, because I love asking my guests this one thing. Your one piece of advice for people listening to this show that's going to help them with their driving. So your speed secret for them. What advice would you give them?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think this can apply to any driver, but I think I'll focus on drivers like me or anyone listening who has just done it a couple times, but they want to keep going. And it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is that just take up space. Just take up the space that you are allowed to take up, whether it's picking this up as a new hobby or it's a full-on goal because you want to be a race car driver, especially women who might be intimidated. Like, you're allowed to get in your car and drive into the paddock, and you get to take up the space there. And when you're on the track, you'll learn safely and you'll learn the right way, and you get to use all of the track like everybody else. So I think that would be my speed secret. That is so awesome.
I've asked a lot of people that question and never have I had one like that. And it is so right. And I can tell you that my first few IndyCar races that I drove 145 years ago, I didn't take up space. I showed up on the track and there's guys like Mario Andretti and Bobby Rahal and Emerson Fittipaldi, and I'm like, my God, what the heck am I doing here? Right. And eventually it was like, I wish I would have had that phrase, take up the space. But so it applies to everybody. Like, at some point in time, you got to go, I belong here. It's mine.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even if you don't feel it all the way to your core, you have to just keep saying it until it becomes real.
You mean fake it until you make it?
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Well, that is awesome, Michele. I really, really appreciate your time, and this has been really fun talking. And
for sure,
one of these days I'll be out at the track and I'll bring my Mini out, and you can show me how to get around the track quick in a Mini.
Oh my goodness, that would be amazing. Yeah. We would have so much fun.
Yes.
But thank you for this, Ross. This was just so good.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing. It matters to us.
And I'd say the same thing to you. So, as I always say, keep learning and having fun.
I will. Thank you, Ross.
Whether you've been to a particular track before or it's your first time, understanding the circuit in detail is critical if you're going to be fast and smooth. Do you know where the apex is for the most critical corners? Or even what corners are the most critical? How about knowing the best places to make a pass? How about knowing exactly where the track has the most grip and where it doesn't? And what about where to find visual clues? Well, you don't have to worry. Ross and fellow coach Peter Kraus are here to help. They will take you on a video tour of a variety of tracks. They are virtual track walks. The feedback about these Speed Secrets training videos has been over the top. Experienced drivers who've been going to the same track for a decade or more say that the virtual track walk helped them shave seconds off their best ever lap times. Go to speedsecrets.com/virtual track walks to preview this amazing tool. It's a detailed resource you have to see to believe. That's speedsecrets.com/virtual track walks. Keep learning and, of course, having fun.